Let's go. Okay. So again, my name, Colin McDougall, National Brand Education Specialist with Corby Spirit and Wine. I'm really happy to be here with the group today. And the focus today is on gin. As you can see on the screen here, we're going to go through what is gin. We're going to go into Beefeater, Ungava, and Malfy. And fortunately, starting off with Beefeater, it is kind of the origin or the fertile crescent of gin, as it were. So it's a great place to kick this off and get going. And so Beefeater is a great place to start, like I said, with what gin isn't, because in a lot of ways, Beefeater did define the style. You know, London dry gin, which is probably the most prevalent gin. I mean, distilled gins also, we'll talk about those. We have a lot of great examples here too to taste. But Beefeater is kind of like the shining star. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later about just London dry gins. But there are technically three different definitions of gin. The first one, under European law, I won't get into the details of the details, but the first one, gin, we're almost never going to find here in Canada. We don't import gin typically, and gin is the, for lack of a better word, like the worst kind of gin that you can use. It's made with processes that aren't as pristine, as opposed to London dry gin, the most rigid regulations around how it's made. Nothing can be added post distillation, except for a little bit of water to bring it down to strength, and maybe a tiny bit of sugar. But no additives and things are allowed after. Now, the other middle one there, which we didn't touch on yet, is distilled gin. And distilled gin is a large category as well, which we're going to talk about with Ungava. And essentially, you are allowed to add approved things into the mix. And so this can involve, you know, compound gins, what we're macerating, which we'll talk about later, things like that, or like infusing to get the flavors in there. But essentially, gin, you know, the main components and the flavoring that goes into it, those flavors are bonded through the process of distillation, whether they're dumped right in or they're racked, and so they get their way into the gin that way. Again, we're not going to go super deep into the definition. We'll get right into it. So anybody that's following along on their computer here, let's try a little poll here. What do you see up here on the screen? The question is, what makes gin gin? And what is the one thing that needs to be present in gin for it to be actually called gin? And I got a little tricky here with this. So I'm going to keep the poll open for a second. The answers that you have, if you're just listening, the answers that are available are coriander, orris root, juniper, angelica root, and citrus zest. Okay, we've got 82% correct here. The answer is juniper. And so the other ones that you're going to see on that poll, which is tricky, coriander is definitely in almost every single gin. Coriander is a secondary flavor, but is not required by law. Orris root is in almost all gins. And if you know orris root, it doesn't really have any flavor particularly, but it's also very famous in perfumes because orris root helps bind compounds like flavor compounds to like alcohols. And so it's kind of like the glue that like allows things to actually come together. Angelica root, again, another very common botanical that you'd be correct. It is in most gins, but is not necessary. And citrus zest, another. But juniper, by definition, gin has to have the presence of juniper in it. And that's a point of contest when it comes to a lot of, I'm going to end the poll here. Everybody can see there. It's not too important to share that here. Okay, let's get rid of this poll, get out of here. And so juniper is essentially not only written into the definition of what gin is, it's also there. It's there for good reason because juniper, you know, like centuries and even and even longer ago, thousands and thousands of years, juniper was known for its medicinal characteristics. And so juniper's been being used for a very long time. Just going to minimize my screen here. Juniper's been being used for thousands of years because of its medicinal qualities. It's a natural diuretic, proven natural diuretic and antiseptic. And those of you, like, if you've ever seen pictures of during like the Great Plague, the Black Death, these people walking around with these like these masks on with these huge long noses, they would stuff juniper into them in efforts to try to keep themselves healthy. Now, whether that worked or not is probably up for debate. But you know, as the story goes, juniper is a proven herb. And so let's look at a few people back in the day. The origins of gin really can be traced back to like even 10th and 11th century in Italy, where alchemists and monks were experimenting with new techniques. And the key here is like gin's origins was alchemy and not science. It was, you know, trying things out. If it worked, great. But there was a lot of guessing, and there's a lot of people who paid the price for us to get to learn to today. But, you know, we'll fast forward over a bunch of that original stuff. And looking here, you can see a map here of London in the 1860s. And so here, this is, or in the 1880s, sorry, you're going to see a bunch of names that you're probably see on the shelves here today. And what the reason I show this this map here of London is that Beefeater is the only remaining London dry gin still made in London. So every single person on that list and every other London dry gin in the world has moved out of London, because as you may or may not know, London dry gin does not have to be made in London. It actually can be made in Alaska or Zimbabwe. It can be made anywhere as long as you follow those regulations. But Beefeater is the only gin house that never left. So not only are we still there, we've never left. And an example of somebody like, you know, Tanqueray, a huge name, is now made in Scotland. So we do hold that with a lot of pride, being the Beefeater that's still there. And so this is the gentleman here, James Burrow, who started it all. James Burrow is the founder of Beefeater Gin, and I'll skip over a bunch of things, but what I always found interesting with James is that James was a trained pharmacist who actually moved to Canada and worked in York, Toronto, for a number of years before. So he's a Canadian pharmacist who then took his knowledge of, you know, mixtures and tinctures, because back in the day, pharmacy was quite different. And he's making these, you know, elixirs for people. He took his knowledge of that, went back to London, goes to the Covent Garden, and decides to become a gin distiller. So he uses all the information that he has, and this is basically what he put together. And so Beefeater is 9 botanicals here, and this is the recipe. And we share this publicly because we know even if we share this, people aren't going to be able to make gin as good as we do. With the way that we distill it, you know, we're talking about centuries of distillation knowledge, and you know, we've made all the mistakes that you can make. And today, to this day, actually, there's 2 guys who are making Beefeater essentially, and it's although it is, you know, a 4 million cases a year product, it's incredibly craft process. And to show you though, again, just to jump back in history, this is James Burrow at his Kale distillery in London. They ended up on Kennington Street, so they moved within London later on. But if you look at his portfolio, I always love this photo because it's going to show you this huge array of all the different brands that he had. But most of these here that you see were actually based off of brandy. Any wine buffs out there will know that in the 1870s, something happened called phylloxera in France, and these little aphids started destroying these. So for the wine country, it starts destroying the vine stalks and roots. And so for the wine people, this happens, but also for brandy made from grapes was affected. And a lot of these liqueurs, most of them, the great majority, were based off of brandies. So thank goodness he had this Beefeater gin, which is based off a grain spirit with botanicals. And through, now don't get me wrong, Beefeater was doing really well as in addition to it, but this just solidified the fact that he's getting out of the liqueurs business, so to speak, and really going full head steam ahead in with the Beefeater, with the gin. Here's the bottles. So if you look at it from the top 3 going left to right, and then the bottom left to right, this is the history of the Beefeater bottle. And you'll notice one prevalent theme there going through, and it is the Beefeater. So what is a Beefeater? A Beefeater is a yeoman warder, and it's essentially a guard of like the London Palace. And when James Burrow, who was a man who had traveled quite a bit, when he came back from Canada, he wants to create this really British gin, London dry gin. And so when he's thinking about, you know, this is the inception of the brand itself and the definitions of it. And when he was thinking about it, what's a better icon than the Yeoman Warriors? They're somewhat known the world over. And so the warders were, to this day, they're still there. There's a huge process to become a Yeoman warder. You have to have a certain level of military experience to be able to graduate, to even be accepted as a person that can be in this fold. And but if you think about it, back then he just as easily could have said, I don't know, Big Ben could have been on there. And because in 1840s Big Ben was constructed. So I like the Beefeater. I'm glad that he went with that, and it's a really cool thing that's on there. Any more information you ever need on the Yeoman Warders, we can definitely provide it. So Beefeater today, again, I just want to let you know, we never moved out of London, but we did move within London, and the Kennington Distillery was in the 1960s, and that's where we stand today. So this is to summarize Beefeater again. I didn't want to give you like a huge masterclass. I want this to be a little fun and top line. So I'm gonna say it again. It's the oldest surviving London dry gin still made in London. There's something to be said about that. It's the style, the essence. The one thing that I didn't touch on, which I always like to bring up too, that it is the world's most awarded gin in independent blind tastings, where somebody gets given samples and they don't know what they're tasting. And these are huge, large awards, smaller ones as well. But we have won the most, and Beefeater, in a lot of ways, could be considered the world's best gin. And it's through its accolades that is earned. And so that you always have that going for you. The tradition of the distilling, those botanicals I showed you, and talking about James Burrow and him going back, in the 1800s and creating this recipe, we still do that recipe to this day. And I told you, there's two gentlemen, I think one's 20 years into his contract with Beefeater, one's 30, almost 40. And these two gents have been basically making Beefeater for the last 20, 30 years. And it's one of the two guys that are making it. So it's this craft process that it's a small number of stills in a small area, but it's an enormous worldwide gin. And when you see Beefeater, usually you think about like maybe this giant factory pumping out, the loads and loads of product. And it is true. They're very efficient. They've got it down to a real science, how they're able to be, running this distillery enough to make like 4 million cases a year. But it is a craft, and you get to see these guys doing what they do. They still use a scale to measure the botanicals when they come in. And the scale is from 150 years ago. So the same one that James Burrow would have used, they're still using that scale. So it's insane. The person who made those scales ran themselves out of business because they never broke down either. So it's like a sad and a happy thing there. And the last thing too, when we innovate, we've had Beefeater 24. If anybody ever saw that, it was a limited release. It's available in some markets, but not here. But whenever we release, any kind of innovation, it's always world class. And so let's move on to what you've got here in front of you. Speaking of which, so the Beefeater Peach and Raspberry. Okay, I want to take a minute just to say, anybody who is really into the spirits, drinking these neat is totally the way to do it. So room temperature neat to really get what makes these different. That's how you're going to get the most out of the comparison tasting. But if you're not, but let's be honest, nobody drinks these room temperature neat. This is just for the education portion of it. And if you're looking at this and thinking, I don't want to suffer through that, it's totally fine to grab a little bit of ice. I'd say not too much, pour it over ice, bring it down and chill it at least. If that's not enough for you, then use like maybe the same soda water or the same tonic for each one. So you can try to get and use just a little bit so you can still taste that. But I want you to enjoy this and get a good impression from it. Now, and so, yeah, having them room temperature neat, this is like a professional gin tasting. But again, I don't want to turn you off. So, okay, I won't keep saying it over and over again, but I'm just going to give a second in case anybody's like, thank God he said that, I'm going to get ice. So I'm going to take 1 minute to pause here. Any questions, please? So while maybe you're running off to grab something, what I want to say for you here. So you'll notice on the Beefeater with the bottle here, you're going to see 37.5% ABV, the legal required minimum to still be called actually gin. And it's distilled with a hint of peach and raspberry. So it's real natural flavoring that is added to this, which throws a little bit of color. And there is a tiny bit of sugar that is added to this. Now, the same way that if anybody's ever made, I used to make rhubarb vodka or strawberry vodka. If you just infuse like rhubarb or strawberries into vodka, essentially, so this would be like a compound or distilled gin versus like distilled through, but you get where I'm going with this. It tastes almost woody, and a little bit of sugar helps bring through those flavors. And so number one, it's there. There's a little bit of sugar, a small amount. When you're trying this, you can taste how less it is. It's not a liqueur sweet, which would be like, see, if that liqueur is 100%, this is way closer to like a 20% sweetness. But it's there to help also the occasion of this. So, I just spent the last 10 minutes here talking to you about Beefeater and all of its accolades of Beefeater Dry. Now, when we come to this here now, this is a way for somebody who just, they don't drink whiskey neat on the rocks or on the rocks. They don't drink, like gin martinis. Maybe they want something that's a little more fun, a little more playful. And this is a way to give people a chance to try something that's a little bit more approachable. I personally, as a gin drinker, like this for mixing. And I think this is great with with tonic. In a Negroni, I think it's awesome. Like I'll do like a white Negroni with it too. But you name it. So the versatility is there still. It's still got the proof and the strength to come through, but it's just a little more approachable and a little more fun. Okay, so moving into Ungava. Let me just make sure I don't have a question coming up here. Oh yeah, that's really nice. Right on. I completely agree with you. So Beefeater London Dry Gin. With the peach and raspberry, there are some other flavors that they've been working with. And again, if anybody's going to innovate and do something, Beefeater definitely is a safe place to go because they are awarded as one of the best distilleries. And we have somebody that's been working at the helm there, Desmond Payne. He's been distilling gin for well over 40 years. So whenever he innovates, he really knows what he's doing. So all of his flavors are great. And this one, this is my favorite out of the group that has come out so far. But let's not dwell too much on the past here. Moving forward, Ungava. So I decided to just show a couple photos of that I sourced from people who have been up there. Ungava gin is it's a Canadian gin through and through. The reason I say that is because Ungava, and if you're looking at the map here, if you can see it, I always look at Hudson's Bay as like the Big Dipper, and Ungava Bay is the Little Dipper. And so if you see the big chomp in the middle of Canada, that's Hudson's Bay. And when you go heading east, you go up northern Quebec and Labrador, you look over there, that is the Little Dipper. That is the Ungava Bay. It is still an enormous bay. It's about 260 kilometers at its widest point, 320 kilometers in length. And it has an area of approximately 50,000 square kilometers. If you're in Imperial, 19,000 square miles. That's huge. This is an enormous bay. And I think it gives you appreciation for how big the Hudson's Bay actually is. But what actually is important about this region, this is tundra. Like this is very, very inhospitable land, but this is where our botanicals come from. And so I've actually got my botanical kit right here. These botanicals are sourced from Ungava Bay, and it takes 3 to 5 years. They start on one side and they sustainably just work their way through the bay. And there's only a certain portion of the year that you actually have enough of a defrost so you can even get up there and look around. But when you're looking at these botanicals here, it comes down to 2 berries. There's a cloudberry and a crowberry. There's wild rose hips, which throw the most color here. You have Nordic juniper, which to me is one of the most key elements because when we talk about gins in Canada, somebody may be a Canadian gin, but all of their botanicals are sourced from the Mediterranean, other parts of the world, where the key flavoring agents in Ungava are from Canada. I'll touch on that again in a second. But then you have Labrador tea and Arctic blend, which are actually of the same plant, but different growing season. And so when it's picked later, there's a parasitic plant that kind of goes in there and does its thing. And I won't get too much into the details, but it's different and adds a beautiful characteristic to it. And so what you end up with here is Ungava here. And so again, we are a premium Canadian gin, which it actually is distilled in Cowansville in Quebec. So the botanicals are sourced in northern Quebec and Ungava Bay, brought down, and then about an hour and a half east of Montreal is Cowansville. And this is where the magic happens. And so the distillation being the secondary process actually to this, these botanicals, which are hand foraged, are steeped for 5 to 6 weeks. It actually depends on each batch. And what they do is it's like an infusion, so to speak. And so this is what makes this a compound or a distilled gin, the way that it's created. And so this process, basically, when these botanicals go into the NGS, like the spirit that they're going to be infused into, it'll be sometimes watching the color and also watching the aroma and the flavor. And so we don't want too much of a over oxidization, which can happen where it can turn brown. And so it really is an intense process to get it to where it is. And it's very, very, like, things can go bad quickly. And so they really have it down to a science of exactly how they make this happen. I've thrown up on there, the nose and the mouth, like, what to expect from the flavors, the tastings. But what I love about this bottle is, if you forget everything that I talked to about today, all of the botanicals are right around the neck here. There's a beautiful breakdown of basically what makes Ungava Bay special. You have the topographical map here showing you the chunk, like the little dipper, like I was telling you about Ungava. And so the information's all together. The last thing, Ungava is set to 43.1% ABV, which is stronger than most gins. And what I really like about that is when you're making cocktails with this, for me, like Negronis are such a go-to. I like just martinis with it personally, or I drink it with soda. But really the key one that comes out, actually I'll say two, but the bee's knees, which is a very popular cocktail that's still trending right now. Think daiquiri with like gin, lemon, and honey instead of like rum, sugar, and lime. But when you make that concoction, it's great with it, and you can really still taste, at 43.1, sometimes like just the flavors still punch through when you have other stuff in there. And so that's what I really enjoy about mixing with Ungava. It really is a bartender's gin, but I think it's very, very smooth. And everybody that's trying it there right now, if you have this next to your other gins, I think overwhelmingly you're just like, woof, that is just so easy drinking, and just a treat. So, but really, I mean, you want to break it down to two things, I think, with Ungava, and I'll have a little summary at the end here, but really a Canadian gin through and through, because the botanicals and what gives this its unique character, its flavor, its color, it is all Canadian botanicals. And so I am a firm believer in, and drink local, eat local where possible. But in this instance here too, I mean, like if that's the caveat there, like this is more Canadian than most Canadian gins, even though this is from Quebec. So there you go. For what it's worth, that's my my 2 cents on the subject. Okay, trucking along here, we're making good time. I want to take you all the way from, we've started in London, we went over to Montreal, Quebec, or Cowansville and Ungava Bay. Let's head all the way over to Italy, down to the Amalfi Coast, where this gin is inspired from, and let you try some of these Malfys. Again, feel free to interrupt me, jump on if you have any questions through, and I will be answering questions at the end too. So let's get going here. Okay, so the main thing when it comes to Malfys here is the ingredients that are in these and where this is distilled. So this is the is this going to work for me here? No, it's not. Okay. So yeah, I'm gonna have to click right on it to get these guys to work. And these grapefruits and lemons are supposed to make a really nice, pretty little video for you. But sorry, folks. Imagine the lemon being picked and the grapefruit being opened. How fresh is that? Malfy Dry is a super premium Italian dry gin inspired by the Amalfi Coast. And we have like we had mentioned there before with Beefeater, we have records dating back to even as far as 1055 in Italy for spirit distillation, and the 1100s for gin distillation. So they have a lot of reasons to be making gin in Italy. They are arguably some of the first people to ever give it a shot. And so there's a huge tradition of distilling here. And it's distilled with botanicals from Italy, handpicked juniper, Italian lemons sourced from the Amalfi Coast, Sicilian pink grapefruits, Italian oranges, the waters from Italy. You get the idea. But where this is distilled is not as commonly known. And so people who are of the wine community know Piedemonte or Piedmont. It's a famous region known for its DOC wines such as Barolo and Barbaresco. And so the Torino Distillati which was built in Montcariati. Sorry for the Italian accent there. Back in, I'm going to try though, in 1906. It's an area renowned for its distillation. And so we have this amazing distillery, which was created back in 1906. And they're famous for distilling such well-known brands as Carpano, Cinzano, and Martini and Rossi, among others. But during the 60s, we actually have a Canadian tie into this. The plant was actually purchased by the Seagram's company, who go on to become the Diageo giant. But in 1992, Carlo Vernaggio, who was a director at the time, purchased it back, and it's an all-Italian owned. And since then, Torino Distillati have been producing incredible brands, of which Malfy is one of the cornerstones. Now, there is an incredible team of people. We have Dr. Don Livermore at Hiram Walker making some of the world's most unique whiskeys here in Canada, and they have a team there doing just the same thing. Most notably, the use of a cold distillation technique, which is relatively new here. Any people that are chefs out there, home chefs, you're going to know low and slow yields good results, right? And so that sort of mantra translates into distilling. And especially when using very finicky botanicals, like in gin distillation, using a cold vacuum distillation, they're able to extract the botanicals in a very, very relaxed way without, burning or, that's not the correct term, but that's the idea. And the representation of those fragrances and those tastes that come through are evident. It does work. And so they're doing something very special and unique there. The other thing that's very important with Malfy is I mentioned how Seagram's had gone over. And if you don't know this, Canada is known for being the best blenders in the world. And so that essence of blending stuck even after they left. And so all of the botanicals that go into the Malfys here, especially with the individual flavors, those botanicals, they are individually distilled. And then they're blended in so some don't get lost in the mix. So they can really, really carefully blend these products to get the right flavors in there. And so it's just an exceptional process through and through. As far as production goes, leading edge, and they're doing incredible things. So again, all of these ingredients here sourced throughout Italy are really what are the backbone of it. We'll talk about each iconic one in the flavors here when we get going. And let's show you the Familia here. We're going to talk about Con Limon. We're going to talk about Gin Rosa and Conoencia. We don't have the Gin Original, which is just their Italian dry gin, which is I'm not surprised, like with this cold distillation, the way that they're making these flavored gins, so to speak. It definitely offers some. It's no wonder because their technique is just so incredible. But let's just take a moment to hover on, let's just grab Con Rosa here, Gin Rosa. So one thing you're going to notice on your bottle in store there, the stopper here, the stopper is made of Italian oak. You're going to see the crest in the center here of the gin. The crest is inspired by the regatta of the 4 ancient Italian republics, Genoa, Venice, Pisa, and Amalfi. It showcases 4 symbols here. You're going to see a crown, a fish, an oarlock, and a traditional racing boat. The Malfy gin also will show you the GQDI stamp, which stands for, I'm going to try it, Gin de Qualità Distillato in Italia, a mark of quality and authenticity. Any Italians out there, I apologize, I'm trying. There's a lot going on here, and there's a little write-up on the back. They're incredibly proud of this gin, and this is the taste of Italy. So it is, and you can taste it in here. So let's get to that. I've been telling you all about it, talking about it. Let's go through and try these. Now, the first one we're going to start with, the Malfy Con Limon. Malfy Con Limon is sort of the flagship of the group here. Believe it or not. This is the one, even though in certain markets, maybe in Canada, when I travel across Canada, I maybe see the Gin Rosa a little bit more. I think just because rose colored things are trending right now. But the Gin Con Limon is the one that is the most prevalent, and it's kind of the one that they started off, the one they hang their hat on. So you get a chance to try this. And so I want to give you some real meat and potatoes here. So you'll see in this blue box, if you're looking, this is going to show you exactly what makes this one different than the Conoencia and the Gin Rosa. Now you'll notice if I skip ahead, the botanicals that are above this, this is the original recipe, so to speak. So these are not going to change. The stuff in the boxes are what are going to change. And it's not surprisingly, when you talk about Malfy con lemon, it is lemons. So it's Calabrian and Amalfi Coast lemons, along with a hand-picked Italian juniper, which kind of give it a punch too. But it is those two lemons that are distilled in through that cold distillation and then blended into this gin that give it this beautiful, beautiful aroma and flavor. Now, I just want you to note the sugar level that as we're going through these, because I'm going to touch on that at the end. But note whether you think these are sweet or whether you think there's additives or not. So gin Malfy, gin Rosa. Let's go into this one next. So here we go. Now, rosas are out there everywhere, whether it's rosé champagne, has a process which gives it color. And in this case, what is the main flavoring thing? So I've done it again. So you will notice if you're really paying attention, the botanicals here of the original recipe have stayed. But what we have here is the addition of Sicilian pink grapefruits, the Italian juniper again, and rhubarb flavor. So really, it's the Sicilian pink grapefruit and the rhubarb that's giving in this its signature rose flavor and color. So moving in here, because we'll have a chance to hover, I'm going to do just kind of boom, boom, boom for you. So con arancia, again, in the blue box here showing you what makes the con arancia, and it is, in this case, the addition of Italian oranges, Sicilian blood oranges, and again, that hand-picked juniper, which is going to be prevalent in all of them. So one of my personal favorites, honestly, here is the Malfy. It's just got such punchy flavor. And if you're trying this last one, this is a great time for me to bring up this next slide here to show you. So if you're not very familiar with the calorie contents that come into alcohol, around 65 is the going rate for calories that just come from alcohol. That's going to be in every single alcohol. No alcohol's calorie free. Alcohol has calories itself. It is an energy. And so looking at this, you're going to see 68. And I took the con arancia because this one technically has like the most, although the difference between, you're going to see a bunch of zeros on the bottom with like con lemon or, but even in the sugars or in the carbohydrates, you're in hundreds of grams. So you're in 0.04. So there is not, and just looking at the calories, that's an indication of like, are they dumping sugars into these? And the answer is no. And so, I think that's something that people would be interested in, the better for you movement, people that want to drink things that are good for them. Not only is this an excellently distilled distilled gin, it's also really great on the spectrum of like how low it is in calories and energy. Now, I just thought I'd share this slide because I did an internal training with our district managers recently. And what I wanted to share with you is the fact that these are the drinks that we're pitching like around town. So these are the ones that you're going to be seeing at restaurants when you go out, when bartenders are working with Malfy gin. And the push for the cocktails are like spritzes and then gin and tonics or jazzed up gin and tonics. That's really where they're pushing them. There's obviously like a huge amount of things that you can do, but I thought I'd share this with you. And if you can look back on the screen here and have a peek, if you want to try any of these, I think they're awesome recipes, the Malfy Sunset Spritz especially, and the individual gins are relatively interchangeable. Some will just offer more punch, more flavor depending on the cocktails. So fun little additional info there. Now, how do they all stack up? I've gone through this whole presentation here now. I'm talking about all these different gins, but I thought this would be a great one just to finish it off on and be like, okay, you've listened to me go on here for a while. Let's go through what exactly makes these different. And what that comes down to is Beefeater here, world's most awarded gin, and the last London dry gin still made within the vicinities of London. And so when you've got this peach and raspberry here, the value proposition or the proposition of this is very straightforward. It's peach and raspberry Beefeater. There's a tiny bit of sugar in there, and this is just more sessionable, easier, more approachable. Everybody that's had a chance to try this now, I think you can all agree. Now this is just, you can taste this better. You know, it's a little bit more approachable for the person that's maybe not like a huge drinker of gin, but also that it still has a place for that person that does, you know, enjoy like their gins. I think this isn't, you know, diluted down. The flavors that are in there are beautiful. So you be the judge there, but that's how I like to speak about it. Next, for Ungava. Ungava is a Canadian gin through and through. Again, the key flavor botanicals that are in here that give it the color and the flavor are Canadian. So I just think that's incredible. And so more than any other gin anywhere in Canada, it is probably the most Canadian gin available to purchase if you want to support Canada. And then last but not least, the Malfys here. I think, you know, the main thing to focus on with Malfy is the fact that these are the taste of Italy. You know, they do celebrate the Amalfi Coast, and they do reference, you know, the lifestyle of different parts of Italy in a lot of their messaging, but it really is a celebration of the flavors, whether it's Sicily, Amalfi Coast, you know, even areas of northern Italy where juniper is handpicked. And then in the distillery, the Trino Distillati in Piedemonte, which is an icon distillery. It's celebration of these, you know, and so that's the essence of it. If you want to go one layer even deeper on the information, that cold distillation technique, that low and slow cold vacuum distillation, and the fact that all of them are distilled separately so that they can then blend them in to make these gins. I mean, you get it. Like they throw everything at them, and they're very, very well crafted. So two kind of areas to kind of go for there. Okay, so if you didn't get the email blast, I am offering up a Sonos Roam speaker here today. We were able to secure some pretty awesome pricing for this session, so I'm very happy to be sharing this today with you. Awesome. I like people are saying the fruits, the beefers in tune with the fruits. I totally agree with that. Before we jump over, Chantal, do you want to say anything before we jump into the quiz?
Yeah, just one. I was going to say, I love your Italian accent. It was awesome. That's a mouthful.
No.
I'm very impressed. So thank you for that. I had a good giggle back here. I'm sure a few other people did too. Just from a commercial perspective of the 3 different gins, for those that are selling your gins, you're looking at kind of 3 different price points, right? You've got your Beefeaters that are kind of your economy gin, and you're coming in around, depending on price points, you know, $26 to $30 before tax. And then you've got your middle priced Canadian gin with its Canadian botanicals if you want to support home and local. And that's sitting at around $40, $45. And then the Malfy gin, it takes you all the way up into that super premium, right? So you're looking at, you know, $50, $55, $60, depending on your price points and your activation on it. So you kind of got 3 different areas that you're able to target your consumer. Also, just this month, Malfy Gin is on a $3 LTO, which is awesome. I know we are hosting a couple tastings with the Berezan group at some of the stores. So that's fantastic to know that that's going to kind of happen that first week of June. I think that June 3rd, we've got a couple tastings booked there. Otherwise, thank you so much, Colin, for your time. And for those of you that decided to join us today. Yeah, good luck on your Minty quiz.
Okay, now when you go to the Menti quiz, it may just say, oh, nice, it goes right away. Perfect.
Hey, Cole, I just saw that one of the QR codes doesn't work on my phone. Is it fine either way? I'm just curious. Can you give them an email, like a link or anything else?
Yeah, so try just holding your phone up. It just worked for mine. So if you hold your phone up to it, you should be able to it'll some will say open in Chrome or open in something. That being said, if you're having troubles here right now, go to menti.com, and then it's going to ask you to enter a presentation code, and the code is just under there, the user code. So I'm just going to give a couple minutes. I'm going to hover on the screen before I pop over and open that up for you. But yeah, so the code that is listed there is 52423120. That's up on the screen. Now you should get to a screen that says Berezan Gin Quiz. And it should take you right to it. Anybody, I'm just going to check the chat here. Is anybody else having any trouble getting in there? So menti.com again, and that's the code. So Tanya, you just let me know when you get in there. Give me a shout. Just looking at the website on the computer. Okay, so I'm just gonna switch over here really quickly, so that I can start the quiz just to make sure that it's showing up for you. So I'm gonna present here. I'm gonna come back and just share my screen with everybody.
I'd love to find out, out of the ones we tasted today, out of this group, what everyone's favorite was. I don't know how we can do that, but it would be really cool to find out. So maybe in the chat, everyone can just put their number one favorite one that they tried today, and we can kind of tally it up and see.
I'm just going to put the Menti quiz code in the chat here really quickly too while I switch over. Oh, somebody already did it for me. Thanks, Jody. Well played. Okay. So back to present. Let's see who is in here. Okay. Now somebody throw in the chat if you can't get in, because I don't want to start this. I want to be fair. Ungava was our favorite. Anybody still stuck out? Speak now or forever hold your peace. It can be a little cumbersome. I know if you're using desktop, or if it's really designed to use your phone. And sometimes maybe between like the different like safaris and stuff, it can be a little sticky, but looks like we're up here ready to go. Okay, great. So I am going to minimize this here. See if I can pin myself here. There we go. You just see me here now. Technology. Okay, so let's get going here with the quiz. This had better work. I think this is going to give you a chance to name yourself. It'll give you one automatically, or you can change it. At the end, you're just going to have to tell me if you won. So I'm going to give everybody a second here. I hate when people plow through this part. So by now you should have had time. I've seen all the little guys jumping in here. Cool. Oh, we got another entry with a donut. They do a great job. Okay. So again, I'm just gonna have some questions here. The quicker you answer, some of them are a little tricky though. Just pay attention. I don't want you to do a quick click on one and be like, Colin tricked me. But we're gonna go through. We're gonna have a little leaderboard, as you'll see, and then we'll be able to crown a winner. So here we go. First question. Who is listening? What does NBES stand for? My title. Tricky one. Don't worry, almost everybody will either get this wrong. National Brand Engagement Specialist would be good, but it is National Brand Education Specialist. Nice one. All right, now you guys know who's paying me for what. Okay, question 2 coming at you. Let's get into the real stuff. Who founded Beefeater? Was it James Beefeater, John London, James Burrow, or Alfred Beefeater? Dun, 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 dun. I made these extra long so everybody get a chance to answer. There you go. I got a couple people with the Beefeater name. It was James Burrow who founded Beefeater back in the 1800s. It's going into number 3 here. Don't worry, there's going to be a lot of questions here that'll even out the playing field here. Boom. Beefeater is the last remaining London dry gin made in London. True or false? Quicker answers will get you more points. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. Boom. Couple people here answered false. The answer is true. We're the last remaining London Dry gin of the old guard that is still making gin in London. There are some small craft ones that are making them, but for the purpose of especially saying the last remaining London Dry gin here, yes, we are. And so everybody else, whether it's Boots, Tanqueray is made up in Scotland now, at their large facility. Everybody has moved out. Some are still made in England, like in Chelsea or some other areas like that. But we are the last of the gin distilleries that never left, have never moved out of London. We did move, as you remember, from one of our distilleries to Kennington, but that was it. Let's see where we're at here. Oh, this is pretty close. So Kaylee is up in the lead, but it is a close race here. Let's keep going here.
Good.
This is fun. All right, we got some real keeners here. Okay, next one coming at you. Answer fast to get more points. What Canadian botanical is not found in Ungava's unique bouquet? Which is not. I've got a list of technically 7 up there. Is wild rose hips, are they not in there? Is Nordic juniper not in there? Are crow and cloudberry not in there? Angelica root not in there? Labrador tea? So there we go. We spread it out. So the one that is not in there is Angelica root. All the other ones are the key botanicals that make Ungava gin. Wild rose hips is the most iconic one, which gives it its signature flavor. But Angelica root is not used in Beefeater. And these other ones that you see on here, I'll just say them again really quickly. Arctic blend, Labrador tea, those are one and the same. Crow and cloudberry, Nordic juniper, which to me is the one that's really the most important. But the wild rose hips is the one that gives it really that yellow color. So people like to focus on that. But there you go, boom. There are 6 botanicals technically, and Angelica root is not one of those core Canadian ones.
Good job for the 2 people who got that right.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, the key botanical for Ungava are hand-picked around Ungava Bay. True or false? The key botanicals that make Ungava are actually hand-picked around Ungava Bay. We had one false in there. No, it is true. They actually are hand foraged, and they take upwards of 3 to 5 year cycles. Well, they'll actually work their way around the Ungava Bay, and they will hand forage these, bring them down, and then they are used to make this gin. It is an incredibly craft gin. And the people that go up there, the way that they sustainably pick them is by moving from one spot. So it's a foraging technique to make sure they don't disturb the area. And that the botanicals will actually replenish themselves. And again, the season that you get is pretty slim. We're in Arctic tundra areas. It's desolate. You saw those photos I shared you. It's a rough place to get in and out of. So they only have usually like a 3 to 4 month, if you're lucky, window per year to go up there. So there we go. So I think we got one more question before we get to C. Here we go. I'm really nailing it home. Which is the world's most awarded gin? There's some great ones on here. But which has won the most awards of all time? Now, thank you for the 2 that said Malfy. I agree. It's awesome. But Malfy is not there yet. It's a newer gin. But it is Beefeater that is the most awarded and most consistently awarded too. As recent as a year and a bit ago, it won another award. So it keeps on standing out as a style that is impressive and continues to impress in blind, impartial tasting. Ooh, did we have a switch of the leader? Leslie up top. Okay, but don't worry, anything can change here. So if you're at the bottom, it's time to start fast clicking to get those points. Just go for it. Okay. How far back does distilling in Italy go? This is a tricky one. We touched on it quick. Was it 100 AD, 1055, 1906 BC, or 2017? There we go. So distilling in Italy, first recorded distilling, and it was in 1055, and in the 12th century, in the 1100s. So we touched on that with Beefeater. We talked about 12th century. The first gin distilling was noted, and in 1055 in Italy, they have documented distilling going on. There may be some people that will say otherwise, but it's as far as is recorded and as can be proven, it is 1055 there in the region.
I think the 1906 was picked because I believe you said that was when Malfy Gin was started, right?
That's when the Montcalari distillery was formed in 1906.
People hearing that out, but I think that's right.
Yeah, but it was AD, not BC. I was trying to be a little fair there. I'd put 1906 before Christ, like before Christ's event. So, but yeah, you're right. That was a little bit tricky of me there. Okay, Malfy Con Lemon gets its signature flavor from. You're going to see a bunch of botanical recipes here. Which is the one that Con Lemon gets its flavors from? So I've actually put up 3 of the key flavoring agents that make it what it is. And so nobody picked Roma tomatoes, thank God. But the Sicilian pink grapefruit and Italian juniper, you remember that from your gin rosa. And the Italian oranges and Sicilian blood oranges is from the Con Lemon. For the Con Orencia, sorry, or blood orange. So there you go. Almost everybody got that one there. And so really it is those 2 different types of, so Calabrian and Amalfi Coast lemons that give Con Lemon its real signature flavor. And again, they're cold distilled in that vacuum distillate, and they're distilled separately, which is amazing. So then they can blend them to make sure you can taste them. They're not just, trapped together in this essence. Before founding Beefeater, James Burrow was what? An English brewer, Canadian salesman, American doctor, a Canadian pharmacist, or a Canadian MP? I love this little tie-in that we actually have with Beefeater. So he was actually not an English brewer, which you may think, okay, that has something to do with the distilling and the whole technique. He trained to be a pharmacist and came over and worked in Canada for a number of years before deciding he wanted to move back. He worked in Toronto, then York, before moving back to England to create Beefeater Gin. It's what gave him the world perspective, maybe to put the Beefeater on the bottle and name it after it in the first place. And the Beefeater is like the kind of slang term for the Yeoman Warders, who are the people that guard London Palace. So there you go. But we have a Canadian tie to Beefeater, which I always love talking about. I think that's cool. Okay, let's see if we had any movement. Kaylee and Leslie. Oh, we have a winner. Kaylee with 6,827 points. Goodness gracious. Now wait, do I have any more questions though? Let me just double check here.
Awesome.
That's it. Okay. Congratulations, Kaylee. Please reach out. We will reach out to Jody. We'll make sure we've got actually the prize at head office here now for you. So thank you everyone for please feel free to jump on video. I'm just going to stop sharing here in a second. I wanted to share my Instagram at corby.colin. It's a way that I communicate with a lot of people. If anybody needs my information, please feel free to reach out to get in contact. But at corby.colin is the best way to start. Everybody, the bartenders Canadian wide and in different parts of the world, we communicate through that messaging service. It's a great way to do it. So it's just at corby.colin. And if you have any questions, like real time, I'm here to answer them for you. You're in store, somebody comes up and asks you a question about Malfy. You're like, oh, what the heck was I supposed to say about that? Open up your Instagram, look at my thing, send a message, say, hey, Colin, what makes Malfy different again? And I'll send you a message. I will, I promise. Unless it's at 3 a.m. or something, for whatever reason you're doing that. But I will get back to you. So please take me up on that. I want to be here to be a resource to help you out if you have any questions. And I do post things about education on my the things that I'm doing around Canada in that field too. So for what it's worth, there's some stuff there worth checking out too. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing here.
And if anyone has any questions, please jump in right now and feel free to have a bit of an open